to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another dinosaur piece. Also, since we're getting really close to Halloween, I figured I'd do one more like kind of girlier, more prettier pieces before we get into the Halloween themed projects. So today we are going to be making a opal themed Allosaurur. Now opals come in a lot of different colors, but I wanted to go for more of a kind of yellowy pink color. So I'm going to go with that color theme and add some golds to it. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so I'm going to start on the clay head first. For this, like normal, I'm going to take a lump of tin foil. With dinosaurs, it always helps to have more of a cone shape with the tin foil, and I'm just going to start covering this in clay. And get a nice surface to work with, smooth everything out. And honestly, with this one, there's not a whole lot of detail. I wanted to focus on kind of keeping it a little bit more simple because I wanted to focus a lot on the painting since we're going to be doing some very interesting colors with this piece. So once I had a basic shape laid out, I started marking out where the features would be. So I kind of just used my thumbs and pushed into the side of the head on both sides where the eyes would go. There's also kind of a more sunken in spot kind of further down, so I'm going to do that too. And then just kind of sketch out where I want the mouth and different things like that. And of course, this couldn't be an Allosaurur without those spiny protrusions right over the eyes. So I'm going to start adding some clay over the top of the eyes and just kind of pinch and narrow it to a point. What I'm going to be doing now is start adding the eyes. So the eyes themselves are just some very simple beads that I actually like the color of. Honestly, if they weren't this color, I probably would have painted them more of a pearlescent color to go with all the other colors that I'm going to have in the body. But I really like the color of these beads, so I'm going to leave them the way they are. So I placed these right in the middle of the sunken in portion where the eye would go, and then I took some strips of clay to make the top and bottom eyelids, and then I also started adding kind of a wrinkly texture around this. I started using my tools to kind of clean up my edges and really refine the shape of everything, and just slowly add texture as I went. Normally I don't really add texture to the face until I'm completely done with the basic shape of it and have all the details lined up, but right now I'm just going to kind of add it as I go. For the scale details of the face, like I said, I'm not going to go super detailed with it. I'm going to keep it very abstract and just kind of focus more around the key features. So the scales around the lips and the nose and kind of around the eyes, I focused more on that and really defining the look of those parts. And then for the rest of the face, I just kind of used a texture to make it look like I did the scales. And one thing I found that I really like to use to make a scaly texture is the backing of a seashell. Some seashells can actually have a really interesting texture, and I found one that I really liked for scaling. So basically I'm just taking this and I'm pressing it into the clay, and I'm going to overlap it and just kind of cover up the surface where I want this texture. And then once I have my scales where I like it, I'm going to clean up the edging around the base of the head so it's nice and smooth and clean. It doesn't look rough or anything. And then we're going to put our head in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Moving on to making the hands of our Allosaurur. For this, I have a pretty simple wire frame set up. Now this is going to be a lot different than if you were doing a T-Rex, for example. The T-Rex hands would be very small, and honestly, they don't need a lot of detail at all because they'd be very vestigial. But when it comes to the Allosaurur hands, they have pretty prominent long fingers. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start covering up my wire frame. I'm going to start by covering up the base where I have all the wires combined. That way I don't have to worry about the wires moving around, and we can do a pre-bake with that. So I'm going to get that done, and I'm also going to add the claws to the wire frame and do my pre-bake. If you're going to do a pre-bake, you just want to put it in the oven for about maybe 20 minutes at, of course, the 275 Fahrenheit temperature. And then after that is done, we can start adding more clay to the wire frame. So I'm going to start with the under portion of the hands and lay out some strips of clay on the wires for the fingers. Once I have those laid out, I'm going to start blending my clay together so I have one solid piece, and then start using the tools to add wrinkles to define where the joints in the fingers are. And then after that, once you're done with the under portion of the hands, you can do another pre-bake. I don't believe I did with this piece. I just kind of kept moving along because I didn't think it was necessary. But if you want to save your progress, you can do that. So for the tops of the hands, you're going to be basically doing the same thing that you did with the bottoms of the hands. You're going to take some strips of clay, lay them out, blend them into the clay that's already on the wireframe, and then use your tools to add wrinkles, texture, scaling, basically whatever you want to the top of the hand. And normally with my hands, I tend to add more texture and detail to the top portion than the under portion, because you end up seeing that part of the hand a lot more. And then once those are done, I'm going to put these in the oven as well for probably about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Now we're going to move on to making the feet. Now the feet are actually very similar to the hands. The wireframe is basically the same thing. You have 3 main wires. They're just going to be a little bit longer, and they're also going to be bent a little bit differently. And we're going to be adding our clay to the wireframe in the same manner. We're going to add some clay to the very middle portion where all the wires are, and we're going to be adding our claws. The main difference with this is, of course, everything is going to be kind of larger and bulkier. So our claws are going to be quite large compared to our fingers. And of course, once we have our claws done and added to the wireframe, we're going to do a small pre-bake, and then we can start adding clay to the bottoms of the feet. Now with the bottoms of the feet, these are going to be done differently than the hands. Instead of using strips of clay, I'm going to be using balls of clay because our toes are going to be a lot thicker and kind of shorter. So I'm going to be using some balls of clay, laying them out on the bottom of the wireframe, and then I'm going to lightly blend them together, but I want to use my tools and kind of define those creases instead of hide them. So I'm going to do that, and then I might add a few extra lines here and there to make some extra wrinkles. Now I'm pretty sure with this one I did do a second pre-bake because of how large the feet were, so I did put them in the oven for another 20 minutes. And then once those were done, I started working more on the tops of the feet and finishing them up. So for the tops of the feet, I'm going to lay out more clay, mainly balls of clay like we did with the bottom, blending them together a lot more than when we did the bottoms of the feet. I want everything to be all connected and nice and smooth, and then I can start adding a scaling texture to the tops of them, and if I want any extra wrinkles or anything like that, I can add that too. And then once I have both of those done, I'm going to put them in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. And then once all of our clay is done baking and is cool to touch, we can start painting them. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do for painting is I'm going to be primering all my clay pieces. I'm going to start off with a white to kind of lighten everything up, since most of the colors that we're going to be adding are going to be more pinks and very light colors. Also, they're going to be metallic paints, so those are a little bit more sheer, so I wanted to start off with a primer to help the paint stick a little bit more. So I'm going to primer all my clay pieces white, and then I'm going to start with the head and get that done first, and then we'll move on to the hands and feet. So the first thing that I'm going to do to the head after we have it primered is I'm going to start adding shadows to the creases around all the details. Now normally with this I would use a black, but because we're using kind of very pale pink colors, I want to stick with something a little bit warmer and softer, so I'm going to be using a brown for our shadows. Once that's done, I'm going to make sure it's completely dried, and then I'm going to start adding my metallic pinks to the face. I'm going to do the entire face first, and then if I want to add different hues and different colors, I can add that on top of our pink. So I'm going to add the pink, let that dry, start adding some purples, and then I even wanted to throw in some gold. So on the more raised up portions, I added more of a gold hint to it. Now for this, I did mess around with the colors quite a bit, so you'll see them change every now and again, and I just kind of wanted to get it exactly how I wanted, because the color of the fabric that we're using is a kind of shimmery scale, and I wanted to get those colors as close as possible so everything blended nicely together. Now honestly, once I got the basic color laid out, I really didn't have much more detail that I wanted to add. I wanted to leave everything very simple. So after this, I just wanted to add a little bit more detail and decoration, so I took some gold paint and I just kind of decorated kind of around the lips and a little bit around the spikes over the eyes. So I just wanted to add a little bit of gold decoration to the face. And then lastly, once all our paint is dried, I'm going to peel away any paint that got on our glass beads that are for our eyes. So I'm going to clean those up a little bit, and then we can move on to our other clay pieces. So our other clay pieces, they're already primered white. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding those shadows that we did with the face. So for the hands, our main shadows are going to be the under portion, or kind of more of the palm of the hand. I want that to be darker than the top of the hand. After that, I let it dry, and then I started going over everything with my pinks. So I took my metallic pinks and I went over the entire hand. And because we added those darker colors to the bottom of the hand, since our metallic paints are a little sheer, that portion is going to be a little darker. And just like the face, I'm going to start adding my purples and golds and just adjusting the color of the skin for our Allosaurur. And then to get everything to feel more cohesive, I'm going to add our gold decoration to the claws on the hands and the feet. So I'm going to be painting these all gold. That way we have the gold detailing on the face and the feet and hands. And it just kind of makes everything feel more one and not like, oh, we just decided to throw gold on the face. So I'm going to get the hands and feet completely done. Once that's done and it's dried, I'm going to go over all of our clay pieces with a layer of resin, and this will help protect our paint. So I'm going to paint that on, and then we just need to let that cure overnight. So since that's going to be sitting and curing, we can start working on our sewing. Okay, so this is going to be the pattern that I'm going to use to make the Allosaur's body. I have the main body itself, an arm, a leg, and we also have a piece of fabric that's going to go down the backing of him. Now for the body of the Allosaur, we're going to be doing this a lot different from what I'm normally used to. Normally, if I'm working with scale fabric, it's just a little bit of a decoration, but this time around, I want the entire body to be as scaly as possible. So I'm going to be trying to use this pearlescent kind of pink scale fabric for majority of the body. So our first bit of sewing is I had the neck and the body separate, that way we can have more of a joint there. So I'm going to be sewing these two portions together. Once the neck is connected to the body, I'm then going to be taking our left and right body piece and we're going to be sewing the under portion of these together. After that, we're going to start sewing the arms and legs. Now for this, because I want the arms and legs to be easier to move, the under portion of them are going to be made out of felt. So I have the under portion cut out of felt, and then the outer portion is going to be the scale fabric. And what we're going to be doing is we're just going to take the inside and outside, and we're going to be sewing down the fronts of them for the arms and legs. And then the last bit of sewing is going to be the backing for him. Now, I want to have this gold scale fabric. I actually went and cut around all the scaling so it wouldn't have a straight edge, and we're going to have this for the backing. But because I want the edges to be like this, I can't just sew it on. So I have this felt piece which we're going to use to sew in place of it, and then we're going to attach this over this. So I didn't have a long enough piece of felt to make this one solid piece, so I'm just going to be sewing these pieces together to make one piece. And then once we have that sewing prepped, we can start putting everything together because our clay pieces have cured. So to put everything together, we're going to be adding everything to a wireframe. I have a very simple one that I have assembled, and we're going to start adding our fabric to this first. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to take the fabric for the body, figure out where the wires for the legs and arms are going to go, and cut some holes, that way we can slide this over the wireframe. Once that's in place, we're then going to take our clay head and we're going to glue this to the wire for the neck. Once that's in place, we can then take the fabric for the neck and start gluing it around the base of the head. So we're going to do this with the body, and then that one piece of fabric that's going to go over the backing of him, we're going to glue to the very top of the head. You'll want to let that completely dry, and then we can start sewing our body closed and stuffing it. So we're going to take the fabric that's going down the back of him, and we're going to sew the left and right to each side of this and just close him up. And it's always easier while you're doing this to start at the head and work your way down, and to be stuffing the body as you go. That way it's easier to get the stuffing in the body. Once that's put together, we can then start adding the gold scales to the back of him. So basically we're going to be gluing this in place using our fabric glue. So I'm going to start in sections. I'm going to do his neck first and work my way down. So I found the easiest way to do this is to add the glue to your scale fabric, the backing of it, and to lay it out. And then I'm going to be taking, I believe this is just a shoelace, and I'm going to start wrapping it around our body where we have the glue to kind of hold everything in place while it dries. So we're basically going to be tying up our Allosaur until he's completely dry. So I did this to the neck, the body, and then I did the tail because I didn't have enough string or shoelaces around to tie up the whole body. But once that was completely dry, I released him from his situation. And then I'm going to start adding his legs and arms. So I'm going to start with his back legs, and basically you're going to take the under portion and you're going to sew this under the wire, and then the outer portion of the leg is going to be sewn over the wire. We're going to get that sewn into place, and then we're going to take our clay legs and we're going to wrap these in place and add them to the wire frame. So I'm just going to take a thinner gauge wire and wrap these in place on the wire frame. Then I'm going to take the fabric for the legs and we're going to start gluing these around the bases of the feet. So you'll want to let that dry as well, and then you can stuff and close up the backing of the back legs. And then you're going to do the arms. These are basically done exactly the same way as the legs, they're just a little bit smaller. So you're going to sew the fabric for them in place, add the clay arms to the wire frame, glue the fabric around them, let that dry, stuff and close them up. Okay, so our Allosaurur is all put together, and now for my favorite part, the final details. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding paint to the clay parts and the fabric to kind of blend everything together and to just add a little bit more detail and have more fun with it. So I'm going to start by adding my metallic pink, and I'm going to go over the seams where the head, arms, and legs are all combined. So I'm going to add that to that, kind of blend everything out. It's okay if the color is different, as long as it's blended with the other colors, it'll look okay. So everything is going to be a little bit more bright around this area because I really couldn't match everything perfectly together. So I started with the pinks, and then I started taking the other metallic colors that we used on the clay legs and arms and face and everything like that, and just kind of messed around with the colors until it blended the way I wanted it to. So once we have everything blended, we can start adding more fun details to this. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to add more scales to it. Even though everything is completely covered in scales, I wanted to add more gold scales. So at first I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to take more of the fabric scales and just glue them onto the sequins, but I decided instead to go with my 3D fabric paint and just add kind of a little bit more texture around everything to break it up. So I mainly added this to the cheeks. I wanted it to be a little bit more bumpy around the kind of base of the neck and everything like that, and then I did a little bit on the sides of him, just a little bit, and then I also just kind of covered up any imperfections that I didn't like with it. Lastly, I wanted to add a little bit more to the hands, but I didn't want to add too much more gold, so I decided to go with a white pearlescent and just add a little bit of a scaling to the tops of the hands and feet. Okay guys, and this is my opal themed Allosaurur. I had so much fun with this project, especially working with a almost fully scaled body. I really liked doing this, and I hope to do this with some dragons in the future. Anyways, if anyone wants to give our Allosaurur a new home, I have it up for sale in my Etsy shop, so check the links down below if you want to do that. Also, I have some affiliated links that show all the different materials that I tend to use to make my art dolls. So if you guys are interested in that and want to support the channel when you buy some art supplies, that's down there as well. And then before we go, one last self-promo. I have a RedBubble if anyone wants to get my artwork on t-shirts, phone cases, literally, like, I think there's like 70 different things you could get my stuff on. So I'll leave that link down there too. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!